So good morning, everyone. So we have some people coming in. We can start right now. So Mr. Hindol Sengupta, Mr. Amarveer Singh, Chairman, CIA Chandigarh Council, Mr. V.K. Kapoor, former DGP Haryana, Ms. Amanjot Kaur, Ms. Gauri Singh, CIA and YI members, distinguished invitees, members of the Chandigarh Literary Society, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you this exclusive session with Mr. Hindol Sengupta on Recasting India. On behalf of Young Indians Chandigarh Tri-City chapter and on my personal behalf, I would like to extend a special welcome to Mr. Hindol to this session. Thank you for sparing out time from your schedule and being with us. We are enthused and at the same time honored to have you amongst us. This session is a part of YI National Learning Series and I am enthused to see the response. These sessions are being organized to help YI members gain from the personal experiences of the eminent and world-renowned leaders and achievers in the respective fields, for which we have us today Mr. Hindol Sengupta. Hindol is a journalist, writer, and an entrepreneur. He is currently editor-at-large at Fortune India. In 2015, his book on India's underbelly of entrepreneurship, Recasting India, was shortlisted for one of the world's most renowned prizes in the economic writing, the Hayek Book Prize, given by the Manhattan Institute. He became the youngest writer ever at 34 to be nominated for the Hayek Prize and the first ever from India. At 22, he was features editor running the global feature service of IANS, serving news features and long-form journalism from India across more than 30 countries. At 25, he worked with Pearson PLC to write the first book on India's mushrooming fashion industry, Indian fashion, which became an industry standard. His next, at the age of 28, was Ramp Up. The business of Indian fashion was described as the Thomas Friedmanesque take on industry and once again became a defining text. He is one of the youngest television journalists to have a primetime interview show, Talkback on Bloomberg TV, at the age of 28. With these words, I would like to once again welcome you all to this session and invite Hindol to address the participants. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for having me here. I'm absolutely delighted to be in Chandigarh. This is my first visit to your lovely, lovely city. And I come from Delhi, and I was just talking to a friend of mine, in fact, Gauri's brother this morning, who was telling me that he's never seen a real traffic jam in his city in his life. So that made me very jealous, because in Delhi, we only see traffic jams. So I'm really very delighted to be in Chandigarh, and thanks for having me. It's a really unique place for me to be in Chandigarh today, because in my entire book tour in America and in India, this is the first city where I'm actually on the dais with one of, if I may say so, one of the characters in my book. My book is, as you heard, about entrepreneurs from across the country, literally from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, because my book begins with Kashmir, and right at the end is a big chapter on entrepreneur in Chennai, right? But it's the only time that I actually had the privilege of sharing a dais with one of the entrepreneurs whose work so inspired the writing of this book. And as it so happens, the entrepreneur turned out to be from Chandigarh, right? And therefore, I'm really delighted to be, and therefore, so I'll speak a little bit about the work, and of course, Gauri is here. She will tell us more about her work. But I'll sort of give an overview. Why did I write this book? You know, I was in Hyderabad where a whole bunch of young entrepreneurs, you know, I was talking to, and they asked me, you know, what is the big thing? What is the one thing that you should do to be an entrepreneur? You know, what's the driving seminal idea that you must follow to be an entrepreneur? And I thought about it, and then I realized that the one big idea to be an entrepreneur is don't listen to your relatives. You know, because don't listen to your relatives. I'll tell you why don't listen to your relatives. Because if I listened to my relatives, I would have been a railway officer, grade 2 maybe in Southeastern Railway, with a salary level of 37,000, 200 rupees to 39,800 rupees or whatever it is, right? And I didn't listen to my relatives. You know, my father's a railway officer. Right? So that's the big thing that you should do, to not listen to your relatives. And I would go one step further and say, don't listen to your parents. Because imagine, let me give you a scenario, right? Imagine if Steve Jobs listened to his relatives, right? Imagine when he was dropping out of Harvard to build this iconic product, he went to his mama, chacha, chachi or somebody and told them, कि जी मैं ये, I'm going to make this, मैं जी computer बनाऊंगा और phone बनाऊंगा. Inevitably, if Steve Jobs would have been Bengali, inevitably they would have told him, shut up and go take the joint entrance examination. Because that's what Bengalis do. They take the joint entrance examination. So one of the big things, and here again, this is a great example. I wrote about Gauri and her work because her parents are architects. They have a whole sort of, their whole life's work has gone into architecture. Whereas she, even though she has a degree in architecture, chose to absolutely move away from that domain and build her in, an absolutely new paradigm after working with Seva in the domestic help and domestic labor industry, which is completely different from what her parents did, right? Which I think is very powerful and exciting. The other reason why I wrote this book is because I really believe if you look at the data in this country, people keep asking, where is the Indian Arab Spring, right? Where is the Arab Spring? There's so much, there's so much economic inequality. Where is the Arab Spring in India? I argue in the book that there is already an Arab Spring happening all around you if you look at what's happening around you. The country is changing in miraculous, dramatic ways which none of us entirely comprehend. Let me give you an example. If I were to tell any of you sitting in this room the word Kashmir, what would be the first word that would come to your mind? Anybody? What does Kashmir mean to you? It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. Anything else? Heaven on earth. Anybody else? Kashmir, what does it remind you of? Terrorism, right? What if I were to tell you that Kashmir has one of the best run banks in the country? Do you ever think of Kashmir as a place that gave birth to one of the best banks in the country? The Jammu and Kashmir Bank has been, for the last 5 years, on the Fortune 500 list of companies from India as one of the best run and best managed banks in their segment. Right? It's a bank run by Kashmiris, employed by Kashmiris. The people who deliver goods and services are Kashmiris. Most of the clients are Kashmiris. It's a revolutionary product. It's a product where in the worst years of militancy across Kashmir, year on year, the bank grew. This was when there was bloodshed across the valley. There would be daily curfews, so much so that managers of the bank would deliver cash to their clients as loans hidden in their jackets on scooters when there was a curfew in the valley. It's a magnificent product and a brilliant example of how sometimes entrepreneurship transforms places in ways that we don't comprehend and we do not accept. And I ask you this, why is it that nobody in India talks about Kashmir as a place from where great bankers come from? Why don't we? Why is that discourse so negative? Right? So that's one example. My whole book is full of such examples. Let me give you another one. How many of you have heard the idea or read about the idea of manual scavenging? Do you know what manual scavengers are? They are people essentially who carry human excreta, shit in their baskets and from dry latrines and throw it away, right? And it's a caste oppression thing because manual scavengers are people who've been manual scavengers for generations to come, right? They've always been discriminated against and made to do this work. 30 kilometers out of the city of Delhi, I found a village called Nagpur, where even 2 years ago, there was manual scavengers and manual scavenging happening. Until a bunch of students from the Shriram College of Commerce went to Nagpur, the village of Nagpur, created with 20 former manual scavenger women now, taught them how to make a detergent and created a brand called Neki, which is now sold across North India. It's a fascinating example of how 18, 19, 20-year-olds brought together people who have no experience of entrepreneurship, but created entrepreneurs out of this bunch of people, and today have this wonderful product which has taken all these women away from manual scavengers. But let's then come to an example very close to Chandigarh. Let's come to Gauri Singh's example. It's a fascinating model. When I first heard about her model, it fascinated me because I always knew that in the domestic labor market, there were agencies, right? And they were largely fly-by-night agencies who sort of, would get a maid placement, but would hold back their salaries, steal money from them, exploitative, so on and so forth, right? But her business is revolutionary because she redefined the idea of what domestic labor means from servant to service. As they say in their logo, Naukar nahi naukri. Because they've built this entire paradigm where the people who work in your homes are trained professionals. So if you hire a cook, that person knows how to cook. That person won't come, what happens in India is कि उसको फिर कुत्ते को भी घुमा दो, पानी भी डलवा दो, बच्चे को घुमाने ले जाओ, पौधा भी काट दो, all of that. And she says, well, that doesn't really work because you need professional help. As homes get bigger, as homes are changing, you need professional help. And if you want a good cook, that person will come and cook. You cannot expect something else from them, right? And it's a fascinating, fascinating story on how that entirely changed and transformed. But none of this is new. That's my other big argument in my book, that we were always an entrepreneurial country. Only for a brief hiatus, about 60 years, we experimented with a form of socialism which didn't work for us. But otherwise, you look at entire Indian history, whether you look at the Hindu part for 3,000 years, or you look at Mughal Muslim rule, that entire history for 4,000 years nearly is entirely entrepreneurial. And it's an interesting time for us to be talking about this today because we are in 2015, the 1,000-year anniversary of Raja Raja I, the great Chola king who built the first maritime routes from southern India across Southeast Asia, right? So they were the great entrepreneurs, they were the great traders who built those maritime routes, right? That time you look at, for instance, and I quote in my book, the great Roman historian Pliny the Elder, who's saying, the Roman emperors are buying so much from India that the coffers of Rome are being emptied. Why are the coffers of Rome being emptied? Because they're buying too much gold, they're buying too much spices, but also they're buying textiles, cloth, which is so fine, they say, that it's like a wisp of smoke. So there was Make in India and Made in India then too. We think of Make in India and Made in India now, but we have always had this prowess. And, if you look at our history, here's the really interesting thing. Till 1857, the first war of Indian independence, India has about 16% to 18% of the world GDP. And then, and Angus Madison, the great British historian, writes about this, within 50 years, when you come to 1900, when 50 years under British Crown, our GDP share falls to 2%. In 50 years, our entire manufacturing and trading backbone is broken. We are one of the great shipbuilders in the world, completely broken. I come from Bengal. The mills of Manchester destroyed the textile industry in Bengal. So again and again and again, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar writes about this. I urge you to read his economic writing, right? He constantly talks about this. Remember, he's the man who says the word socialist should not be in the constitution, and he refused to let it in. Later on, of course, under emergency, the word is dragged in. He talks about how economics can revolutionize the country, right? But I will end, and I would, I want you to hear Gauri because her example is so potent, and she's from this city. But I will end with this wonderful story, which really thrilled me as I understood India's potential of entrepreneurship, and a potential because 50% of Indian GDP, ladies and gentlemen, comes from the informal sector, which provides 90% of all Indian jobs. Most of these firms, 3/4 of these firms are run by SC, ST, OBC, have employees who are women, and they do all of this with less than 10% institutional banking finance. Imagine if you could provide institutional banking finance much more. That's why I love the idea of the Mudra Bank. If you could provide this to this informal sector, how many millions of jobs could be created? And there's an example. Malaysia has already done this. In Malaysian history, if you look at it, there was a time when their informal sector had under 10% institutional finance. Over 20 years, they focused on it and took it to 25%, which revolutionized their first boom of tiger economy boom was built on the back of this, right? So if we can only do that, imagine how much it would transform. But I'll end with two small examples, one from Mughal India and one from a little more contemporary India. The Mughal India example comes from a man, an entrepreneur, a business person called Bhimji Parekh. Most of you would have never heard of a man called Bhimji Parekh. But Bhimji Parekh in Aurangzeb's time is one of the most powerful business people, entrepreneurs, traders in the city of Surat. Right? Now, when Aurangzeb begins to destroy temple after temple, Bhimji Parekh and the traders get together and say, look, we pay an enormous amount of money to the emperor as taxes from our business. But if you don't allow us our freedom to practice our faith, and if we are oppressed, then we can't do business like this, and we cannot give the money that the emperor seeks. So he leads the first institutional trader strike in India, in Surat, hundreds of years ago, when all the traders of Surat moved to Bombay, saying that, if we are oppressed there, we will not be, we can't be part of the system. Until the local representative, the Mughal representative there, has to bend to their will because they gave so much money to the coffers. And they sign a document saying all their religious places will be protected. So the first strike, in some senses, by merchants impacting society happens by Bhimji Parekh. This similar example, though of course not in a religious context, is in how entrepreneurship is fighting caste. And I'll leave you with this story. In my travels and journeys, I extensively spoke to a man called Chandrabhan Prasad, who's the great Dalit economist. Some of you may have heard about him. He's done extensive research with the Howard Kennedy Institute on how economics has transformed caste in India, especially in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and certain problematic areas. He tells me this story about, so Chandrabhan Prasad has a wonderful line. He says, pizza delivery ka koi jaat nahi hota. Pizza delivery has no caste, right? Now, many of you might wonder, what does pizza delivery have to do with caste? How is it relevant? How is it connected? So bear with me for 5 seconds as I tell you how this is connected. Imagine a boy or a girl from Azamgarh, Bilariaganj, interior Bihar, who's always been from a Dalit agricultural laborer family, gets the first opportunity because of economic liberalization to go to a city and work, right? And they go to a city, imagine this boy or girl, and they get a job, any job. Maybe they become a pizza delivery boy or girl, right? What happens in a day-to-day life of this boy or girl? They put on a uniform, they take the pizza, they go on a moped, they come to a home, they ring the bell, the door opens, somebody takes the money, gives them the money, takes the box of pizza, shuts the door. But at that moment, Chandrabhan Prasad says, magic happens in the mind of this boy or girl. In that moment, their mind explodes. Now, why do you think their mind explodes? Their mind explodes with magic, ladies and gentlemen, because perhaps for the first time in many, many generations, they realize there's a different universe. And in that universe, somebody will take food from their hand and not think for a moment what their caste is. I don't think perhaps any of us sitting here in this audience today can truly, we might be able to comprehend it, empathize with it, sympathize with it, but I don't think we would really understand what it feels like to go through that. That what is the magic that happens in the head of that person. And I believe in the power of economics because of examples like this. Because I believe in that moment, the dreams of Adam Smith and Ambedkar come together, if you know what I mean, right? And it's a magical moment, right? And I think that revolutionizes and defines what I think about entrepreneurship. I believe entrepreneurship, and I'll end, and I would like to invite Gauri to speak after me about her experiences, but I'll end with an example of something she once told me while the book was being written, and that has always stayed with me. And I said this in ISB Mohali also yesterday where we were speaking. I asked Gauri, when I was interviewing her extensively for the book, what happens to all these women who come from very poor backgrounds when they start to work for your company, right? What happens when they get this economic freedom, right? And I expected that she would say, well, they buy some first goods. They maybe buy a mobile phone, a better dress, maybe some cosmetics, so on and so forth. But she said, what really happens to them is their spine begins to straighten because they've always had literally a physical manifestation of oppression which is bent, right? So their spine begins to straighten when they see this power of economics and entrepreneurship. And that, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is a marvelous, marvelous example of the power of economics and the power of entrepreneurship. Because it's not just the spine straightening of a few people. It's the straightening of the spine of a nation. Our spine was bent and broken by colonial rule. Our economic prowess was beaten down and broken by colonial rule. And it is time we all collectively strengthen and straighten our spine. And it can only happen through entrepreneurship. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Gauri to come in. Sorry? No. It's a great example. I think you should.
I'm not as prepared as Hindol is, and it's a tough act to follow. I started my company 3 years ago, and I've always focused on the informal sector economy and the unorganized sector, and also women. These are the two areas that I've been focused on in the last decade and have learned a lot from an organization called Seva. In 2011, I started something called the Maids Company in Gurgaon, which essentially mobilizes and organizes part-time domestic workers who are mostly migrant labor coming from poorer states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bengal, coming into Gurgaon looking for work. The biggest pain point in urban areas these days is also the lack of domestic service. Most homes are almost, I get calls from some of my clients almost crying on the phone that if I don't send them a worker today, their life will fall apart. So it's a very big pain point. So there's a huge opportunity over there from a market perspective, and there's a big need to create dignified employment for women over there. So essentially what we do is we organize them, we train them, and then we place them in homes, and then we manage that entire service. So we also orient them. There is this kind of misconception that all our homes are exactly the same, and any unskilled labor can come in, and it's just very basic work that doesn't need to be paid for. But as our homes are getting modernized, women are getting out to work, this is skilled labor. So you need someone who's responsible, skilled, who can come in and take care of all of that work, including childcare, cooking, and manage your home while you're at work. So that's essentially what we do. We've trained up to 3,000 workers and serviced up to 1,500 clients in Gurgaon. And in our next phase, we're going to go try and go national with this model. So yeah, that's generally what we do.
Any questions, anybody?
Yeah, so when you read the book, I mean,
it's okay.
Yeah.
But then it is evolutionary.
Yeah.
From Mughal. Because you see, we react to what is happening down at the ground.
Yeah.
Mughals came, then there was fight. Then British came, there was fight.
I mean, let's take the example that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, time was short, so I only mentioned Jammu and Kashmir Bank. But if you read the book, the whole chapter, the Jammu and Kashmir Bank is one of them. But since you mentioned it, let me give you an example. I speak about in the book another 10, 15 choice entrepreneurs, right? One of them, let me just give one example. This young lady, she must be 26 or 27, called Asifa Jan, right? She has single-handedly, and she comes from a very poor family, she has single-handedly transformed, many of you might know, there's something in Kashmir called Nunda carpet making,
Yeah.
right? Which was almost dying out until this young girl brought about this revolution in making those carpets again. But there is a nuance here, and that's what's really exciting for me as a writer. The nuance is she cannot tell her own relatives that she does this work, because in traditional Kashmiri society, Numda carpet making was done by so-called lower castes, even in that society. So she cannot tell her relatives that she's doing this work. So after I did extensive interviews with her, she was like, but you know, the problem is that I can't tell most of my relatives that this is my line of work, because they will immediately judge me for it. And that's when I decided that wherever I go, I will say, don't listen to your relatives.
I'll answer. It is the individual which matters.
Sure. Entrepreneurship is always about
individual. You see, I belong to Dubai, every third fellow is abroad.
Yeah.
Now, an Indian, a Punjabi especially, is standing for the president's job in the United States of America. Nikki Randhawa, you see, becomes Nikki Haley is the governor.
Right.
So it is the individual limit matters, you see. Gandhi was an individual.
Sure.
Started a movement. Bhagat Singh was an individual, started a movement. So caste has nothing to do with. It's the individual is matter. She's a young girl, she has done it, it's a good thing. She has that thing. So adventure, entrepreneurship, it is individual, you see.
Sure.
Some people have got to do, so they do it. So, but yes, I agree with you. But entrepreneur, but it is evolutionary. We react to what is happening. We react to what is happening. Once upon a time, women never came out of the homes. So now we have all the women, you see, and they're doing so well. IAS, they're doing so well. So it's good. The entrepreneurship is good. So we wish the young lady all the best for all the things. They're doing a wonderful job. That shows we are progressing, you see.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Hindol, I just want to know, let you know that the states are only playing the part of elephant catcher. Whenever you talk to the what called the investment Punjab and CEOs of those states, they only look at to catch the big fish, the elephant catcher, and it's very difficult to sustain them, obviously. And they're milking the MSME cows all the time without giving them any fodder. So this is what is happening to the MSME industry, that you go to them, you provide the employment, you are not accessible to chief finance, but still you sustain the economy with 80% of employment and everything of that. You pay the more taxes than the last scale.
Yeah.
So how do you think this,
So some transformation will come. Like, see, for instance, that's why I mentioned in the speech, like in the whole budget, I was really uninterested in the 9 o'clock news kind of debate about the budget. What really caught my eye about the budget, if you really ask me, is the idea of the Mudra Bank. Because one of the biggest problems for entrepreneurship in India is institutional finance. It's exactly what you're saying. It's all getting mopped up by the large players. So unless we push institutional finance, right, and and Gauri and I have discussed this so many times that, unless that institutional finance ecosystem is there, and imagine if somebody like her finds it difficult to raise money, what about so many other smaller entrepreneurs, who might come from even smaller towns, underprivileged, but they're also really hardworking. So institutional finance is one of the biggest problems. And I think ideas like the Mudra Bank could go a long way to solve some of these problems. The other thing is that, this idea of getting everybody a bank account, it's a great beginning. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's the one fixed solution. There is no one fixed solution, right? But it's a great beginning because it brings people into the institutional economic system. And at some point, hopefully, that journey will begin, and where people will access it more. They will first begin by getting subsidies, then they'll be eligible for a bank loan, and they will move forward. So it's a journey. So you're absolutely right that this is the biggest problem. And I keep saying institutional finance, unless we fix that part of the puzzle, we cannot grow further.
That is right. See, basically the states are only interested in going out of the beginning bowls. The big companies, they say, okay, come to my state, we'll give you this, we'll give you that.
Yeah.
But when the small scale people come to them, they get nothing. I mean, you're on your own.
So that's absolutely. So which is why the ideas like the Mudra Bank are a huge, I think, very, very relevant. But the problem is nobody talks about this. I mean, even in the budget, we spoke about all sorts of other things. But it's ideas like this that are really transformative on the ground.
And besides, there are no incubations. Like you talk to the people that, okay, can you get some handshakes with some good technology people? It's for me to get a handshake from technology partner in Holland is very difficult.
Yeah.
But if the government of India could, or Punjab government could say, okay, we'll bring the technology and give it to a subsidized price. We'll give you that technical know-how.
Yeah.
I'll be the best person to get it. But then they're doing better. We have got a huge Punjab Agriculture University here, which is, I don't know what they're up to. But they could put up a little bit of unit with food processing, nursery there.
Yeah.
I think
Market connect. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Things like that.
Absolutely. No, I'm not denying that. You're absolutely right. Yes, the gentleman there, I think.
Hi Hindol, I'm Navdeep, and I just want to ask you one thing. Like you have talked about this thing that this girl in Kashmir, about that carpet.
Yeah.
Actually, what I feel in this context is, Hindol, she's looking for a universal acceptance first, in her community. You might be aware of the fact that a day before yesterday, there's a member of parliament in Pakistan, Mr. Lal Mahli. He delivered his speech in the Parliament of Pakistan that he said, I am a Hindu and we are looking for the acceptance in Pakistan from the last 67 years, and our temples have been destroyed, and why Pakistanis are not trying to accept us in this context, and the same is in Kashmir. It's a flip side, vice versa. So what do you think that, what I feel is that girl is looking for universal acceptance in her community to, that she can speak her heart out to manufacture those mats or something like that. So what do you feel in this context, correlating these two countries, India and Pakistan?
I don't think there is any correlation. I don't correlate. I de-hyphenate India and Pakistan. So in that I disagree with you. I don't think we can today sitting here hyphenate India and Pakistan anymore. India is at an absolutely different trajectory, different space, different journey, and Pakistan has its own journey. I don't want to, I have nothing to say about Pakistan. I only have to say that this hyphenation doesn't work anymore.
No, I asked you this because you told about the Jammu and Kashmir
so
bank.
I don't know how
you compared that bank with other states of India.
But
That
Jammu
why
and
we
Kashmir is in India, right? I mean, what does it have
that's
to do with
fine.
Pakistan?
But what in this context, like why we recall Kashmir in that context is because those people have seen that transition for so long, because कि कश्मीर को terrorism के कारण याद किया जाता है या ऐसा ऐसा
I mean, so then now, I think this is the right forum to get into the history of Kashmir. The history of Kashmir has its own context, and we can discuss this offline, what that context is. But even in Kashmir, if you go to Kashmir and travel to Kashmir, and I go to Kashmir very frequently, there is a wellspring of entrepreneurship, but it's got trapped. Even the Kashmiri debate is, look at the turnouts that Kashmir has for elections, but it's a bunch of complete, I don't want to use a disparaging word, but complete culprits, like, Gilani and a bunch of crooks who have completely captured the debate in Kashmir and refuses to let it. You talk to the normal people of Kashmir, they want to move forward, because the people of Kashmir, this is my understanding, and somebody can disagree with me, which is fine. No one in Kashmir wants to go to Pakistan and be part of Pakistan. Anybody who believes this is completely wrong. For the simple reason, look at where India is and look at where Pakistan is. So there is no public desire to be part of Pakistan in Kashmir. It's just that a bunch of vested interests are constantly conniving to keep the Kashmiri situation alive, so that they make money from it and get power from it. If you talk to the ordinary people of Kashmir, nobody wants to be part of any violence or be part of Pakistan. So it's a bunch of vested interests that's keeping that place alive and the troubles alive. And I am arguing that go talk to the normal people of Kashmir. And they want entrepreneurship. I mean, my book is full of those examples. Hydropower, agriculture, saffron cultivation, a bunch of people, apple orchards, new ideas in cultivation. But even, I'll give you an example, since you mentioned Kashmir. There's this wonderful guy in my book, Mehsana, he has apple orchards in Mehsana. He says, well, I just want to grow my business. But every now and then, vested interest creates a curfew. Then my trucks cannot go. Then I face losses. So they are battling a purposely created, connived situation. Now, there's a political problem that has to be solved. That's a different thing. I don't want to get into that, right? Because that's a larger debate. I am just saying, dehyphenate Kashmir from Pakistan and India from Pakistan. And we have to do what we have to do. And as you strengthen the hands of local entrepreneurs, there is there's a spillover effect of positivity. People make more money, their children go to better schools, they have a better life. That's the way of progress of democracy. That's my only argument. Yes, sir.
I have some information. We had an interaction with the CMD of Union Bank of India here. I think you're part of that day. They had offered a 1 crore collateral-free loan. And then there was a question from the members that we don't actually get it. When you go to the bank, we don't get it. So he ensured that anybody who doesn't get a loan, please come to us. Secondly, we've been having a lot of interaction with a lot of ambassadors from various countries. We had a very close interaction with the ambassador from Canada and his team about 2 days back in Marriott. All these countries are looking at India for a lot of investment. They are going out of the way. They're asking us, please let us know what do you want, how you want to invest, what technology you want. And CI has a desk here. All the information is available here. You can contact the CI desk and they'll put you on to any country you want for anything. They're very keen. All of it. This is a question.
Thank you. The gentleman there. Okay. Yes, sir. So just 1 second. Let the microphone come to you, please.
No, I think I am audible. Well, you mentioned that institutional finance is the biggest bottleneck in the path of entrepreneurs. I entirely agree with you. I don't think so there can be any two opinions about it. Now, in our ecosystem, unfortunately, the problem is that the conventional banking, which is fairly good, is fairly okay, is not geared towards the smaller sector or the informal sector. Right from the beginning, right from day one, I started my career with State Bank of India, so I know. And I also know because I was a part of one of the path-breaking schemes in which the State Bank lent as low as 600 rupees for people to own their own rickshaw. I was in Satna at that time. I was a probationary officer. And we went through that, and obviously these people had nothing to offer as a collateral. So we had a joint collateral. तो हम उनको डराते थे कि ये 16 लोगों को हमने रिक्शा लेके दिए हैं, अगर इनमें से एक ने भी पैसा वापस नहीं किया तो 16 के 16 की रिक्शा वापस ले लेंगे. So that kind of thing. What I am trying to emphasize is that if you look at some of the models that got developed, especially in the Silicon Valley, where the small, medium, large, all kinds of financing has happened, and you know what is the result. I don't have to explain it to this august audience. Sure. There has to be that kind of a development which can be funded or seeded by some of these banks. In fact, the idea of venture capital started by ICICI in a thing, SEED and many others, it hasn't taken any shape. It's still on paper. So I am quite afraid about the Mudra Bank also remaining on paper only. That's the issue.
Sir,
the idea,
raste bhi on paper hi reh jate hain.
let me explain to you. You know, with a little experience of banking and investment banking, both areas where I have been into the big ticket financing also. The problem is that when I am doing a big ticket financing of, let's say, 10 crores, 20 crores, 30 crores, for a quantum of money, my time required is fully justified. But when I am talking of an investment of a few thousand to a few lakhs of rupees, the amount of time is almost similar. And that doesn't get justified. That doesn't get financially justified. So there has to be something, some mechanism worked out. In fact, if you look at now all these venture capitalists sitting in the country, Helion or many others, I have some, I mean, although I have retired, I have some connections with them. Now they don't want to pick up a deal which is less than, say, 10 crores or 15 crores or 20 crores. So they are now they have moved into a different class. This is the kind of institutional finance if we have to create, state or bank sponsored or people who are entrepreneurs themselves, small entrepreneurs, some kind of a mechanism has to be developed there. I have been groping in the dark on this issue as to how we finance the informal sector, which will have, as you rightly pointed out, the Malaysian example, and there are many other countries which have proved that. In any case, now it is well established, well accepted economic theory that economies are made by entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
I don't think so there is any debate on that issue. All economies, if you look at, and that has been the downfall of the socialist system itself, because it did not reward the entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
It just did not reward the entrepreneurs. I mean, the classic example is we have all played that Tetris game. The origin was a Russian originator. It was invented. Had he been in America and he had taken out a royalty right and all that IPR and whatever it is, he would have been probably the richest man in the world. Now, this is where the point is that it is entrepreneurship which makes or mars a country, economy, number one, and to ensure that the entrepreneurs are suitably encouraged and nurtured, we need some kind of an ecosystem. And that ecosystem has to come both from the formal as well as the informal organization. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, sir, please.
You're very right, sir. We agree with you. What financing was so many years back, today the trend has definitely changed. If you want a loan today, the banks are very competitive, very aggressive. I also know, because I'm also into manufacturing unit we have. I used to have a lot of problems with the banks, nationalized bank taking a loan. But now also I've just got a call from the bank. They're after my life with the best of rate of interest. Things have changed. The biggest thing is mindset. You know, we were talking about smart cities, make in India, you know, and when you come home, it's made in India, you know, made at home. If the made is not home, you had it. You know, your make in India goes for haywire next day morning. You know, yeah,
Made in India.
made in India. So it's MAID, made in India. If the made is not at home, your next day make in India is go for haywire. You know, you know, you have a turbulence throughout the day. So yes, the governments are now offering the Modi government, they are trying to promote Make in India. That's where there's a lot of thrust on the skill development, like this also, I mean, it's part of it also, and a lot of initiatives are being taken. But we're talking about smart cities also. I was just talking to them. The most important is smart citizens.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah. So we can make a smart city, but what about the smart citizens? We are the people who are going to maintain or create this smart city. So it's mindset. It will take time, yes. Yes, we have to change with time. And definitely, changing the mindset is the biggest challenge we have. And things are improving what we are. And hopefully, we will go ahead in India. Yeah.
The figures on the balance sheet and all this stuff, but we should look at qualitative. What kind of passion the entrepreneur has, what is kind of, you know, what is the kind of feeling he has for growth. So that is more important for the banks to judge.
Let me just share my experience. Remember earlier, you used to have a bank limit, and probably the next year you didn't have good sales, the bank used to drop your limits. That's the time you wanted the maximum money, and they pull out more. So I told the bank manager that time that you are fair with the friends. When you're doing, me and me are doing good, I mean well, and you're with us. And when we need your help, you run off first, guys, you run off first. First people run off first. So, but now there's a change. If you're not doing, it's not necessary that every year you do well. Your graph can go down, can go up also. But if it goes down, they will not reduce the limits. Yes, they will not increase them further also. So they change. Practically, they are changing to a great extent also, yes.
Hello, sir. Sir, I'm an engineering student. I wish to be a writer, a fiction writer. So I have two questions. Your education, was it a journalistic background? And how did you get all those opinions and research and start writing, putting into a paper? How do you start that procedure?
So yeah, I studied journalism. I have a bachelor's honors degree in journalism, and then I went to Jamia, to the Mass Communication Research Center. You may have heard of it, Delhi's famous mass communication research. So I was there, and I always wanted to be a journalist. So I was trained to be a journalist. And my research, as far as my research goes, it's a byproduct of my journalism. So I do, whatever I write about, the stories I write about or I've reported on, I keep, building for many years this research, which then finally takes the shape of a book. So my research happens through journalism, and then I sort of put it together as a book. So that's the sort of.
So have you ever seen somebody from an engineering background join into journalism?
Yeah, I mean, well, not Chetan Bhagat. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So.
So you listen to your relative. You want to be a journalist, but you are in engineering, so you
must have listened to his relative, yeah.
But I'm pursuing writing. I write short stories.
But anyway, as you know, it's all relative, so to speak,
Good morning.
Yeah, which relative is more?
Good
Yes,
morning.
the young lady there, go ahead.
Besides not listening to your relatives, what is the one inspiration
Yeah.
the young entrepreneurs or the young smart citizens to be can derive from the book? Besides just, inspire.
So I think, so a lot of people ask me, why did I, as a business journalist who works at Fortune, to work at Bloomberg and so on and so forth, why did I not choose to write about the big business houses? Why am I not writing about the Tatas and the Ambanis and so on and so forth? But this is exactly the point. I wanted to write about, not about them because they're so much written about and reported on, but a lot of people who came from, backgrounds like yours, and even much more sort of underprivileged backgrounds and became entrepreneurs. Exactly for that. So the lessons therein are, if you really want to do something, you have to make the first. A lot of times in India, people don't even take the first step. they're so caught up in social mores that they don't take the first step. And I think in some senses being a little underprivileged helps, because you have less to lose. You know, when you come from a lot of privilege, then you know, you have this and you have that and you have society status to maintain and all of that. Whereas if you're a little underprivileged, you have nothing to lose. You just straight out and go ahead and do what you really want to do, and I think that's really powerful, right? So when you read the book, you'll realize that many, many of the people I write about, they're all people who succeeded against all odds. And the other big thing, if I may say so, which is the lesson in the book through many stories, is that you need to learn to embrace failure. See, the biggest problem, another big problem in India is that our society is not geared to letting people fail. We are very judgmental about failure. At every personal, professional, we are very, very judgmental. The moment people fail, we're like, acha nahi, tum to fail ho gaye. And I say this as somebody, you know, I was forced to take science in school, 11 and 12, and I hated it. I should have taken humanities, but in those days in Calcutta, you know, there was a lot of pressure, I didn't have a choice, and I hated it, and I did very badly, and I almost failed in my class 11 examination. You know, I basically, completely on the benevolence of my principal, I passed. But I could have failed. But, you know, it was think about it, it's just one failure. I mean, it's not a big deal, but in our society at that time, it was a earth-shattering thing. I mean, even today, people, you know, students get bad marks, they kill themselves. It's crazy. Whereas, and people keep talking about Silicon Valley and America. What's the big lesson from America? That there's no problem if you fail, right? Entrepreneurs across America keep failing. They start a business, it doesn't work. They're like, okay, I don't want to do this. I'll do something else. It's a society that liberates them. Whereas we are constantly judged, acha, and in everything. Tumhari itni umar hogi, tumne shadi nahi kiya. Fir tumne bache nahi, you know, you don't have kids. Then you're like, oh, acha, how much are you earning? Then in Chandigarh, which sector are you living in? You know, how big is your koti? You know, do you have your first car? Is it a luxury car? Do you have your second car? Is it an SUV? We are trapped in this society, and these things are the biggest problems for an entrepreneur. I mean, you look at the early years of, say, somebody even like Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he's a multi-millionaire in the first year, you know, say 5 years of Facebook or 3 years of Facebook. And he's still living in some little flat somewhere with his girlfriend. He doesn't care, right? His work is the most important thing. And in that society, nobody is asking Mark Zuckerberg's mother, कि तुम्हारा बेटा क्या कर रहा है? शादी कब करेगा? You know, Chinese girlfriend क्यों है तुम्हारे बेटे का? American क्यों नहीं है? You know, गाड़ी कहाँ है? अच्छा, अभी तक उसने फ्लैट नहीं खरीदा? अभी तक रेंट में रह रहा है? You know, all of this is nonsense. I mean, we've got trapped into it. And we must embrace failure, because failure teaches something. If I hadn't failed in 10 things that I did, I wouldn't be standing, or rather sitting here in front of you today. You know, I'm what I am because I failed in so many things. So that's the other lesson I really push, that you must embrace your failures and not allow your ecosystem to judge you for it. In this book, सर पूरे देश कवर करना था तो चंडीगढ़ आ गया, लुधियाना अगले बार करेंगे. No, so look, obviously this book also was structured. When you read the book, you'll realize it was structured on entrepreneurs that are fixing various social problems, as in their business is about, is in spaces which has a societal problem in India. So for instance, Kashmir, a volatile situation. Domestic labor, again, problematic area. Caste, problematic area. Manual scavenging, problematic area. Then there is a village that I talk about, entrepreneurship in that village. It's in Vidarbh, in the drought-hit area. But I'm writing another book, and since you mentioned Ludhiana, Tirupur, all these places are there. I'm writing a new book on the great Indian dream, so which is where all of this will come in. But this was targeted towards entrepreneurship. I wanted to show how, see, all these problems, if you think about it, sir, whether it's Kashmir, or whether it's caste, whether it's women, poor women, or domestic labor, conventionally in India, we've always thought that the state should solve these problems, right? It's the government's job to solve these problems, whether reservation, whatever. I wanted to prove through this book that there are millions of people working to solve these problems at an entrepreneurial level. That there's an entrepreneurial solution also to these problems. This is not to say the state doesn't have a role, it does, but there are also entrepreneurial solutions. Yes?
Yeah, hi Hindol. Like you said, when you started your speech, you said whatever we are talking, it's like the entrepreneur's dilemma.
Yeah.
Right from the first thought process
Yeah.
of your idea and rejected by the relatives, by the parents, then obviously the problem of the institutional finance.
Yeah.
So definitely in India, the ecosystem is not per se in favor of entrepreneurship as per se. Now, if I have an idea, I know it is a brilliant idea. I talk to X number of people, my friends, my family, my relatives. 90% of them say it's a brilliant idea, I should go ahead with it. My parents, they refuse. We'll not back you with this idea. Now the project cost, let's say, is 5 crore of rupees. Now where do I go? I can't do anything.
Yeah, so this ecosystem will get built. See, in America, for instance, you would approach something called angel finance, right?
Yes.
That network is very nascent in India at the moment. But it's getting built. See, it's a curve, right? We are at the start, and as Sir would know much more than me as the head of CII here, it's a curve. We're at the beginning of the curve. We're at the beginning of the cycle, so to speak. And you will see in the years to come, I mean, even full-fledged entrepreneurs like Gauri, for instance, constantly face this problem of raising money. Where will the institutional finance come from? How much will they have to, what kind of terms and conditions they will get the money from? So it's a curve, and it will steadily rise, and we are at the beginning of the curve. I guess, that's why people like me are also writing. That's why we are examples of entrepreneurs we are bringing forward, so that the ecosystem builds. See, the ecosystem won't get built magically. It's through conversations like you're having with me in front of somebody from CII, maybe they're a government representative. It's an ecosystem that will get built slowly. It won't happen in a day, but we are hoping that it will happen, sooner rather than later.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. In Bangladesh. Well, I come from Bengal, not Bangladesh, so therefore I only sort of know about this side. But having said that, look, microfinance in Bangladesh, Grameen, I did extensive research on Grameen and the Muhammad Yunus model. As you know, in Bangladesh, there are some questions that are asked about Grameen these days. But the more interesting example these days comes from Calcutta, from a company that has just got a banking license. And so, Bandhan, yeah. So they do excellent work, and it's entirely based on women. If you look at the Bandhan model, entirely based on women, right? And they do stellar work, and now they have a banking license. So they are, growing even further. So there is great, there's certainly reason for hope there.
So, I think he made a very important point that even today the venture capitalists, they are typically looking for, large ticket investments, right? And I guess, the next big thing will probably start as a small toy rather than, something, which is big. So, that's where, you briefly touched upon that angel financing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see that ecosystem of, angel financing or seed money, getting built up in India? Because I guess, unless, we have that ecosystem of, the Y Combinators of India or the 500 startups of India, at least in the tech world, I don't see, how that, enough progress can be made, or, how it can be, quickly, that progress can be made. So do you have some viewpoint on, what you see is happening in the angel?
No, I certainly think, for instance, there is a lot of, increasing finance available for pure play technology companies. But that also is a bit of a bubble. And in fact, I would, I'll give a quick question, and maybe Gauri can take that question because she's far more. See, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a writer, right? So it would be good to get her perspective because that's what she does at a day-to-day basis. But from my experience as a journalist, it's an ecosystem that's getting built. But at the moment, it's very focused, or a large part of it is focused on technology startups. But the other place where it's coming in, and very interesting, I was traveling across Uttar Pradesh looking at this, it's coming in solar energy, in energy. So you're seeing a lot of these companies do small microgrids. So it might be just like 15, 20 villages. It doesn't have to be a massive investment of this, major grid system. So that's another place that's coming in. But maybe, she can take and give a perspective from as an entrepreneur.
No, getting finance for a business which is even slightly different from what the norm is, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely hard. For me, it's been a very difficult journey to raise money, and most of the money I've raised has been from actually a loan on my house. So it's not that it's easy to get money, but most entrepreneurs who end up with the first level of finance, which is a 10 crore ticket size or $1 million or $2 million, their initial phase is done from families and friends. So you are actually going to your family and friends circuit who believe in your idea, get them to invest in that, make a prototype or a product, and then take it to an investor, because the seed funding in angel space is almost negligible or absent right now.
जी ओम
Marketing, yeah, that's another big. Well, I mean, depends on different companies have different marketing problems. It depends on company to company. But it's difficult to give a generic answer to that, sir. I mean, we'll have to define which company, what sector, which industry. So, it's tough for me to answer from this podium what would be a generic marketing solution. But different companies, we'll have to drill down into which sector, what company. Yeah, certainly. I mean, any company that wants to more effectively promote themselves, there is a lot of free technology available today which was not available in the past. Yeah, and effective use of those technologies, certainly at negligible cost or zero cost or very small cost, can definitely have an exponential impact on marketing. This is certainly true. I mean, even something as basic as Facebook ads can get you a lot of sort of impressions, which earlier wasn't true, right? I mean, earlier, where will you do it? You would have to depend on traditional forms, give an ad in the newspaper or whatever, right? Which these days is far more, powerful. Go ahead, sir. You want to ask a question?
ओम प्रकाश राय ETV न्यूज़ से जी। आपने ये जो किताब लिखी है रिकास्टिंग इंडिया, तो आपने जिक्र किया अभी 1857 का, औरंगजेब का, पारिक साहब का, मंदिरों के बारे में किया। तो जो आपने रिकास्ट किया है, जो समय लिया है इस किताब से, और पीछे जो आप रिकास्ट ये जो शब्द है वही दर्शाता है कि इस किताब का मतलब क्या है। तो समय वो कौन सा समय से आपने मिलाया है इस किताब को, और वो ये किताब उस आधार पे लिखी है?
कौन से समय से
मतलब जो इतिहास आपने पीछे के इतिहास से अभी जो
मैंने इतिहास नहीं लिखा है एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप का, मैंने एग्जाम्पल साइट किया है 3-4 चीजें बताने के लिए या कंक्लूड करने के लिए। पहला तो अगर आप इंडिया की, भारत की आप पूरी हिस्ट्री देखें, ज्यादातर भारत की हिस्ट्री में एंटरप्रेन्योरियल कंट्री ही है भारत। ट्रेडिंग कंट्री है, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कंट्री है, बिजनेस ओरिएंटेड कंट्री है पूरे हमारे हिस्ट्री में। ये पहले तो ये जो सारे आपने एग्जांपल्स मैंने साइट किया, या भीमजी पारिक का एग्जांपल साइट किया, या उसके पहले भी किताब में है द्वारकानाथ टैगोर का एग्जांपल साइट किया बंगाल से। ये सारे एग्जांपल्स ये दर्शाते हैं कि हमारे पूरी हिस्ट्री में हम एंटरप्रेन्योरियल कंट्री ही हैं। या चोलास का मैंने अब बताया कि उन्होंने मैरीटाइम रूट क्रिएट किया था। बीच में कुछ दौरान हमारा ये सोशलिस्ट सिस्टम था, पर मैं ये आर्ग्यू कर रहा हूँ कि आज भी 50% जो जीडीपी है हमारे, वो एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप से ही आती है, क्योंकि वो इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर से आता है, और वो 90% नौकरी देती है ना। 50% जीडीपी, 90% नौकरी उसी सेक्टर से आता है। तो मेरा आर्ग्यूमेंट ये है कि हमारा बैकबोन जो है इकोनॉमी का, वो एंटरप्रेन्योरियल इकोनॉमी है, और जितना हम इसको स्ट्रेंथन करेंगे उतना हमारे सारे कुछ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो।
एग्रीकल्चर को ज्यादा आप चाहते हैं स्ट्रॉन्ग करना चाहिए।
I mean, वो डिपेंड करता है सर कौन से स्टेट के एग्रीकल्चर की आप बात कर रहे हैं और कहाँ कितने जमीन की बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि अगर बहुत मार्जिनलाइज्ड लैंड होल्डिंग है अंडर 2 acres, फिर देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम, क्योंकि वो सस्टेन नहीं कर पाती है फिर फैमिली को।
तो ज्यादातर लोग वही हो गए,
ज्यादातर लोग वही हो गए, तो वो कंसोलिडेशन की जरूरत है, तो इसीलिए लैंड रिफॉर्म्स चाहिए हमें। तो वो एक प्रॉब्लम है। पर इस साल 2015-2014 वाज द ईयर वो पहली बार हमने देखा कि इवन एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर में जितना भी इंडिया एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर है, उसमें इवन इन रूरल इंडिया मैन्युफैक्चरिंग गिव मोर जॉब्स देन प्योर प्ले एग्रीकल्चर। तो वो एक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन रूरल इंडिया में भी हो रहा है। सॉरी आप
सर, मैं ये जानना चाहूँगा कि जो आप ये किताब आपने लिखी है, तो आपने क्या पूरे देश का इसके लिए भ्रमण किया है?
मैं भ्रमण करता रहता हूँ। मैं जर्नलिस्ट हूँ, तो भ्रमण करना तो हमारा
मैं भी जर्नलिस्ट हूँ, मैं भी घूमता रहता हूँ, तो मेरा ये पूछने का कार्यक्रम था कि आप बंगाल से हैं, मैं आपके बगल से हूँ, बिहार से हूँ, और देखा जाए तो देश की जो आबादी है सबसे ज़्यादा ये 3 स्टेटों में है, बिहार, उत्तर प्रदेश और बंगाल। तो कुछ आपका इस किताब में उस भाग को लेके जिक्र है, क्योंकि वहाँ उद्योग की जो स्थिति है आप देख रहे हैं।
तो फिर वो पॉलिटिकल किताब लिखनी पड़ेगी। अभी बिहार और उत्तर प्रदेश की अगर बात मैं करूँ तो फिर वो पॉलिटिकल
नहीं, बंगाल को लेते हुए, क्योंकि वहाँ भी उद्योग जो है आप देखिए किस स्थिति में
ना, वो कुछ भी वो लालू ने डुबा दिया आपकी स्टेट को 15 साल में, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप सब खत्म हो गया।
कम्युनिस्ट ने भी सर वहाँ पे कुछ बेहतर नहीं किया, जो पोर्ट वगैरह थे सब उद्योग
वहाँ पे पॉलिटिकल, जैसे 30 साल में 35 साल में जो कम्युनिस्ट रूल था बंगाल में, पूरे इंडस्ट्री को खत्म कर दिया बंगाल में, कुछ नहीं बचा है ना, पूरा खत्म कर दिया। तो अब वहाँ पे अगर मैं जाके एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप की बात करना शुरू करूँ तो वो तो फिर मुझे 100 पन्ना तो लिखना पड़ेगा कि कैसे वो खत्म हुआ था। और मैं इस किताब में लिखना चाह रहा था कि क्या क्या पॉजिटिव हो रहा है, क्योंकि वो बिहार में कुछ नहीं हुआ, बंगाल में कुछ नहीं हुआ, तो बहुत लोगों ने लिखा है, कितना हम लिखेंगे, वो तो पॉलिटिकल प्रॉब्लम है ही। अब देखिए उत्तर प्रदेश में कुछ भी नहीं होता है, तो क्या करें हम उसके बारे में। बंगाल में अच्छा आजकल तो थोड़ा इधर उधर वो शुरू हुआ है, पर जब मैं बंगाल में बड़ा हो रहा था 30-34 साल में, कुछ भी सब कुछ जो भी फैक्ट्रीज थे सब बंद हो गया। वो इनकलाब जिंदाबाद करते करते 30 साल बीत गया, तो प्रॉब्लम है ही। लेकिन एक डेमोक्रेसी में जब तक आपका बेसिक गवर्नेंस ठीक नहीं होगा, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप आई कीप सेइंग डज नॉट एग्जिस्ट इन वैक्यूम। वो वैक्यूम में नहीं एग्जिस्ट करता है, उसको थोड़ा तो इकोसिस्टम का सपोर्ट चाहिए। वो मैजिकली मैं आज उठूंगा, कोई भी लालू का राज चलता रहेगा और मैं कहूंगा मैं बहुत बड़ा एक बिजनेस शुरू करूंगा, वो नहीं हो पाएगा। कैसे आप करेंगे? बंगाल में क्या होता था, जो भी जिसने भी पैसा लगाया डूब गया पैसा उनका, तो वो तो प्रॉब्लम है ही। तो मैं जरा थोड़ा पॉजिटिव किताब लिखना चाह रहा था, ऐसे भी जितना नेगेटिव तो है ही हमारे न्यूज में, अब थोड़ा किताब में भी कोई नेगेटिविटी लिखेंगे तो फिर प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है सर।
आप किस दर पे पहुंचे हो, व्हाट शुड वी डू इंडिया की डेवलपमेंट के लिए, प्रेस के लिए?
We don't have to, I mean, the government
has only history.
The government has to get out of the way. I keep saying the government has to get out of the way. Government is the biggest hurdle. In many cases, the hurdle is the government. तो वो तो जब तक नहीं निकलेगा, वो तो निकलना चाहिए, पर निकल रहा है काफी जगह से।
गवर्नमेंट का जो असली,
आप देखिए तमिलनाडु में क्या हुआ है,
वो करती नहीं।
जी
गवर्नमेंट का जो असली काम है
वो नहीं करती,
वो नहीं करती।
Dispensation
of justice
जी
has to be with the government only.
So exactly the same point I make in the book. So absolutely, sir. I couldn't agree more with you. I make this point in the book that I never say government doesn't have a role. It has a very powerful role. Even if you take business, India has one of the most poor application of contracts. The application of contract, people don't trust. अच्छा मैंने contract sign कर दिया, कुछ भी हो सकता है. Tomorrow the guy will turn around and say, you can stuck me in litigation for the next 10 years. Right? So वो जो